John chapter 2, and beginning in verse 15. And verse 15 begins with a command. And the command is, do not love the world or the things of this world. Don't do it. Then it continues on. If anyone loves the things of this world, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Here is a statement. And a statement, first off, as we said, with a command, and then an explanation in this, that is, you either love the world or you love the Father. You love the world or you love God. All right, it's that simple. This is an either or. And either or choices, you can't get more simple than that. It's either this or it is that. There is no third option. And God only gives us simple choices. He only gives us simple choices. It's either right or it's wrong. It's either with Him or it's not with Him. It's away from Him. Either you are gathering with Christ or you are scattering abroad. One of the two. There is no third option. And there's no other things to be considered whatsoever. I remember a kid, this goes back years ago, he was convinced that Baskin-Robbins, and seldom did I ever go to Baskin-Robbins as a kid, but he was convinced that Baskin-Robbins had 3 flavors. It had vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate. He was convinced that's all it had. And me and some others were confused as to, well, why would you think that? Well, as it turns out, he was never allowed to go into Baskin-Robbins. His dad would keep him in the car. His dad would go in, but his dad would say they only have 3 flavors. It's either vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. Which is it? Okay, you got it? All right, let's go. Otherwise, he knows if he took his son in there, his son would never come out. And he would be looking at one thing after another, after another, after another. All right, you have all these choices. God does not give us all these choices. It could not be more simple or more streamlined. It can't be. And He is stating, do not love the world or the things of this world. All right, so we can do that. But I can also look at John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. So if God loves the world, how is it that if I love the world, I cannot love the Father? All right, first off, we're talking about 2 different uses of the word world. Do not love the world or the things of this world. Is that of loving this place and loving the things of worldliness, loving the things that are temporary, loving the things that mankind and even Satan himself puts in front of us so that we become enamored with it, obsessed with it, taken by it. And I'll tell you, that's easy to do. We'll come back to that in a second. But John 3:16, for God so loved the world, that's talking about humanity. That's not talking about anything else. That's not talking about the actions or the artistry or the skill or anything else of humanity. That's talking about human souls and everybody. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. All right, He did that for human souls, not so that we could have more movies, or that we could have more sporting events, or that we could have more whatever it happens to be that we're producing, more beautiful jewelry or things that go fast. It's not that at all. Nor did He die for this world in a celebration of worldliness. Christ died for us. But here with this, do not love the world. Here we have the love of the world and the love of the Father are at odds with each other. You cannot serve 2 masters. Jesus speaks about that in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. You cannot do it. Let's go now to the book of John for the moment. Go to the book of John. And we go to John chapter 15. And we begin in verse 18. Some information we need to know. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. Why would the world hate Christ? Well, it's very simple. Verse 19. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. We go to John chapter 1. Understand, Christ is not of this world. If Christ were of this world, one, His servants would fight. Yes, if His kingdom's of this world, His servants would fight. But if Christ were of this world, the world would have accepted Him. John chapter 1, we go to verse 10. He was in the world, and the world was made through Him, and the world did not know Him, meaning the world didn't regard Him. Didn't regard Him as anything. This is the carpenter's son, is it not? We know his mother. We know his sisters and his brothers. We know who this is. This man is from Nazareth. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now I realize those are the words of an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile. That would be Nathanael. But still, that is there. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Can anything, this is a nobody, but he does not regard them, that worldliness, as being valid. He does not. If he were of the world, he would have accepted the powers that were there. He would have accepted the Sanhedrin court, whether it was the Pharisees or the Sadducees. He would have accepted the scribes and all of the leaders. He would have been just basically a politician, is what he would have been. But he is not of this world. He brings a message that's not a worldly message. He brings a message that's from heaven. And that message from heaven does not originate from this world, does not belong to this world, and therefore the world dismisses it, does not like it. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. It's foolishness, because it's not of this world. Look at how mankind makes things up. Look at how that is done. Whether we talk about the Greeks in the first century, they sought wisdom, but it was the wisdom of this world. And with that wisdom, it's a kind of an enormous selection even back then. It's more so today. But this enormous selection, what is wise and what is not wise? Where are we on that? And they would just select their favorite philosopher, I suppose, their favorite thinker, and they would go with that. And then you would have all these other things of stories about gods and sons of gods and daughters of gods and demigods and all these things, all these heroic types. And the message of the cross is different. The message of the cross isn't like that at all. It's not like that, because that didn't come from the world. That came from God. That's not just another bit of lore to go in with all the rest of lore. That is truth. And that is how God saves mankind. Now we go to verse 11. So we're still in John 1, verse 11. He came to His own, and His own did not receive Him. His own? Yeah, He created us. We are His own. He owns everything because He created it all. All things were created. We just go back up to the beginning of the chapter, verse 3. All things were made through Him, and without Him nothing was made that was made. He created everything. Anything that is created, He did it. That is the Word. That is the Christ. Now, the love of the world and the things of this world, it's easy to become enamored with them. Easy. And I can attest from my own personal experience that I can become overwhelmed by the works of men. I can become overwhelmed by it. I can become just in the cities or in buildings or in things of hydroelectric dams or nuclear power stations or spacecraft or aircraft or cars, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I truly believe that we as people are growing more and more enamored with what we create rather than what has been created by God. Just the other day, I saw a mug, and it kind of gives it was meant as humorous, but being humorous means there's an element of truth to it. And on the mug, it said, "I went outside once. The graphics were terrible." And I thought, well, that expresses kind of a generation that we're in. That kind of expresses that it's not as good as what I have seen. I'd have a few more volcanoes here and a few more dragons there and a few more clouds over there. And what do you, this is reality, and you're in it. The love of the world can just bring you in like a whirlwind or like a vortex, like some sort of a whirlpool can just drag you in. And one can become enamored, become taken by the things of this world. But here you have this mutually exclusive decision. Either it's the Father and loving Him, or it is the world. Once again, Matthew 6:24, you cannot serve two masters. The one you love becomes your master. We're hardwired for it. That's the way it is. Now, we continue on in this. The love of the Father is precisely what is desired. Let's go to John chapter 15. Go there. And we just want to read a different verse. John chapter 15, once I get there. And we look at verse 23. He who hates me hates my Father also. All right, we can just switch that around. If you have a love for the Father, you have a love for Christ. If you have a love for Christ, which is what he's saying right here, you have a love for the Father. So a love for the Father is having no desire for the world. Having a love for the Father is also having this love for Christ. They come together. Now, you have Jews in the first century, and even living to this day, actually, who are around this day, that they believe love of the Father is, the love of Jehovah. And I can love Jehovah, but not Jesus of Nazareth. And just be dismissive of Him. But if you truly love Jehovah, you also recognize His Son, His Christ, and it is Jesus of Nazareth. Now, we go back to 1 John and we look at verse 16. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. Here are the things that are of the world. And there's nothing about it that's positive. It's very much like what Paul states in writing to Corinth in 1 Corinthians, that he sees in them envy, strife, division. And that didn't come from the Father. That didn't come from Christ. That's not being spiritual. That's being mere men. That's all that is. That's being not a spiritually mature person. That's just a physical person. That is a worldly person. A worldly person is not looking for something that is greater, is not looking for what God wants or what God has shown us or what God has taught, or truly want wisdom, but it is all these other things. All these other things take us, and you have temptations that are everywhere. And they come from different directions. But understand, God tempts no one. He doesn't do it. In James chapter 1, 13 and 14, He doesn't tempt anyone with evil, nor is He tempted. He tempts no one. And so, where do these things come from? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Because the world is full of that. And it says all that's in the world, these are in there, and that it's not of the Father, but is of the world. Where did that come from? That comes from our own failings. That comes from the fact that we have an adversary and a tempter who would try to stir anything up and everything up, trying to make us fail, and he's very successful at it. But we have a way back to God. We have a Savior, and it is Christ. And Christ does not want His followers just continuing in this line of lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. He doesn't want this. And here we have these three categories that are given for us here. And none of it is good. All of it leads to sin. Every bit of it leads to sin. So the things of the world lead where? Not to the Father. They lead to sin. And they also are coming to an end. They do come to an end. And here we come to verse 17. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. I can't help in thinking of this, and I wish I could think of something else, as a matter of fact. But there is a particular singer. I'm not going to invoke her name tonight. But she sang that, in my estimation, stupid song, Material Girl. All right, probably know who I'm talking about. Material Girl. All right. I'm sorry, but what you're saying is that being material, you're going to have a shelf life. And it's coming to an end. And I think the news may not have reached her yet that your shelf life may have passed a while back. All right, that material girl is not a girl anymore. And that material girl is just like anything else material, anything else worldly is passing away. Everything about this world passes away, and the lusts of it. If we could go back in time, it'd be a great thing, but we can't. If we could go back in time, we would see that people were having the same difficulties that we have today. There would be all these temptations that are just surround people. They would be there, and there would be the glory of man and the glory of this world that's in the past, wherever people happen to be. Worship of the human body, worship of heroes, worship of various things, not God, worship of sin. Everybody going through this world faces these things. Everybody. And it is all passing away, and the lust of it. I know that when I was a child, and as I grew a little older, and looking at the things that I used to love, like when I was 8 years old, looking at the things that I used to play with when I was like 4, it meant nothing to me. It's like, that's for babies. I don't want that. Why is that even in my closet? This is I don't want to even look at this thing anymore. And I do believe in a similar way, that's the way we will be. In realizing after this world that this is all passing away, and the things that occurred here, while we can become taken by them, are things that they're nothing. They're absolute. It's like cotton candy. It just disappears. There's no substance to it. There's nothing to it. What God gives is, well, we just see, but he who does the will of God abides forever. Well, that's a promise. And that is something of where the world passes away. All lust of the world passes away, but the one who does the will of God is going to outlast all of that? Yeah. Yeah, we will. We will last beyond all that. We will go beyond all that. And the will of the Father, or the will of God, as we see here, he who does the will of God, the will of God is to love the Father. It is that love of the Father, and it's connecting it together. If we didn't know it already, and I think we could already have gathered that from the teaching of Christ before we get to 1 John, but with this we see it is connected together. If you're going to do the will of God, there has to be that love for the Father. And as Jesus states, he who loves me keeps my commandments. It's not enough. It is not enough to say that I believe that. I know a man right now who, I guess his only bragging point is that he believes in Jesus Christ. Okay? In what way do you believe in Jesus Christ? Well, that he existed. Okay. Well, is there anything beyond that? Maybe not. That's not enough. I believe that Muhammad existed. But I also believe that he was a liar and a thief and a murderer and a warlord, not a prophet of God, completely unfamiliar with the biblical text, and was never visited by any kind of angelic being or otherwise, never went to a heaven to receive any kind of message, never was on any kind of mythical beast that he rode to heaven, none of it. He made it up. So, if I believe that Muhammad was a real historical person, does that mean I have faith in him? No. Can someone believe that Jesus is a historical person and have faith in him? Not necessarily, no. Not necessarily. It's going to require faith in him, faith in his words. And so we read 15 again. And here is what we have been told not to do. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So let's just discuss a few things, because we can actually be taken by the world and not realize it. Because there are things in this world that seem like, I need to, this is important, when it may not be. When Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24, you can't have two masters. He said you cannot serve the Father and mammon. You can't serve God and mammon. What's mammon? Well, that mammon is he's speaking of wealth that is there. What about the rich young ruler? What actually ruled over him, as we see from the text? What actually ruled over him? It was his money that ruled over him. He could say that he kept all the commands of God, and perhaps he did as far as he understood them, but he did not realize that it was his wealth. That's where his love was. And he may have gone to his grave not realizing that's where his love actually was. Because in his mind it would seem like that's what you're supposed to do. Or it may realize that what else am I supposed to do? It would all seem like it's natural to him. But as we see from Matthew chapter 13, with that of the thorny ground, he who receives seed among the thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. That is a love for the world. May not know it, but it is. This cares of this world, that's a big category. That's a big category. That would include wanting to please men rather than please God. That would be part of that. That would be of afraid to say what ought to be said, afraid to say the truth simply because you don't want to offend somebody, you don't want to have to upset someone. That can be part of the cares of this world, or that there's going to be some kind of reprisal, some kind of consequence by telling the truth, that you may not be treated the same. That's called the cares of the world. That is having a love for this world and the things of it. Having a love for this world is an enormous category, and those cares, it's more than just money, and more than just having an adoration of man-made things and the things that man does. It's more than that. And we need to examine our lives and look at ourselves and consider. A love for the Father means letting go of this life. Letting go that things are not that important if it's getting in between us and God. If it's doing God's duty, let's do God's duty, because that's part of it. Let's do that rather than being controlled by the world, whether we are silenced or whether we are told that we must say certain things, believe certain things, act in certain ways. If it's against the will of God, put that aside. You don't need it at all. God is here for us, and He makes our lives better all the way around. And it is a love that is powerful and utterly surrounds us and wants the good out of us in every aspect of our life. This evening, if you need to respond to the invitation, we ask that you come as we stand and sing.